Well, Caravaggio in reality was an artist, a very great artist, who lived at a time when there was a perceived Islamic threat to Europe. But he himself was essentially apolitical. He did eventually end up, as I say, as one of the Knights of Malta, and would presumably have taken part in any military struggle that came at that time. A struggle which, in the Mediterranean context, was to some extent averted, but which reappeared when the Ottomans attacked Hungary and Vienna. Caravaggio could well have been involved as a soldier in that, but of course he was mysteriously murdered, and we will never know how he would have reacted to the threats of his day. I was inspired to write this particular novel when I read several years ago an account of how a long-lost painting by Caravaggio, one of the great Italian masters of the Baroque period, had, after 200 years, been rediscovered by pure chance in the Jesuit house in Dublin, where it had lain for about 60 or 70 years with no one knowing its history. And suddenly it came back to life as one of the great pictures, the great masterpieces of that 17th century period. What was it doing in an Irish Jesuit house? How did nobody know it was there? This is a painting that was worth many millions, is today worth an absolutely fabulous fortune. And of course, as always with Caravaggio, there are stories behind the pictures. A story set in two time zones, once in the early 1600s when Caravaggio, the great Baroque master, was at his peak, and the second in our own time, but a little bit ahead of now, so that it would be set, say, 10 years from now or 15. The link between the two is a great picture, a great masterpiece, The Betrayal of Christ, painted by Caravaggio not long before he was exiled from Rome and had to flee under sentence of death after he became embroiled in a fight in a square in Rome, in which one of his opponents was run through with a sword wielded by Caravaggio. The painting, The Betrayal of Christ, shows the scene in the Garden of Gethsemane where Christ is betrayed by Judas. And on one side of the painting we see a figure normally called Saint John the Divine, one of the disciples, fleeing. He is, in my view, the fleeing man, and he struck me as a mysterious figure. He wasn't just recoiling from the horror of the scene, he was actually doing his best to get the hell out. What did he know that we should know? And Caravaggio gives us clues in the painting. These clues are deciphered centuries later by the Irish-born Father General of the Jesuits, Father O'Malley, and his intrepid nephew Liam Dempsey. They discover that there was a great plot afoot in Caravaggio's time which threatened the Vatican and threatened the Catholic Church and threatened Christendom itself. This is linked in the story to a similar plot that is unfolding within the Vatican itself that could lead to an Islamic takeover, whether the plotters win and destroy the hope of a Christian Islamic accommodation, or whether Europe is propelled into a new dark age. "400 years ago, that in many respects mirrors our own century. The Ottomans had regrouped. They had built themselves a new fleet, retrained their armies, at last understood the principles of gunfire in a concerted way, and were once again on the march. Not long after Caravaggio's death, they were once more battering at the gates of Vienna. They were moving through Hungary. They had established and confirmed their control of the Balkans. Had it not been for a great Christian revival, which involved the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope, it is quite possible that an East-West divide in Europe would have taken place, rather like the communist period when Eastern Europe was controlled by the communists and democracy controlled the West. Life is different today, and thus we have many millions of Muslims living in Western Europe as well as Eastern Europe. Their numbers are rising all the time. This has given rise to concern. Obviously, I express the hope in the book that this situation can be resolved peacefully, that the two sides can learn to live together, because if they don't, then conflict becomes almost inevitable. We hear news from beyond Europe, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Libya, from other places, which causes all of us to think that Islam is not exactly in a healthy and reasonable state of mind at the moment. I can understand that. I think a lot of people share that view. But we must remember that there are many, many millions of Muslims living throughout the world, including in Europe, including in America, who live perfectly blameless lives, but still the church is seen as a bulwark against Islamic encroachment, and the interplay between the two, between the Islamic faith and the Christian faith, is once again becoming one of the more dominant themes of our times, and in a sense Rome is becoming once more the cockpit of the West.